The first chapter talks about, and our first unit talks about, the entrepreneur. Who the heck is an entrepreneur, and what exactly is that anyway? So we're going to take a look at that. What I've done is in the course itself, you will see that I have, I'm going to call them Word documents, or like the contents is in a Word format. I'm changing it, or I'm putting it into the slides just for the sake of being able to use it on this type of system as opposed to handing it out in the classroom, okay? So this is why I'm kind of switching over. This is the first time I've done this course since the moratorium on classes, so I have to get some work done at that. So it's very much a work in progress on my part, and I need to be able to make it work perfectly, and it might not the first go around, so just bear with me. Anyway, so what are we going to do today? Well, today what I wanted to do was introduce you to Philip Mercer, because like all things in entrepreneurship, it's really difficult to talk about this type of stuff, or it's more difficult to talk about this type of stuff unless you have some frame of reference or someone you can relate to. And I know the book has all kinds of examples of entrepreneurs in it, but I try to find something a little more local that we might be familiar with, because you might actually bump into these people in town. So what I wanted to do today was to look at Mercers Marine. Now, Mercers Marine, I'm sure you're familiar with it, and even if you don't live in Clarenville, if you're listening to this and you're somewhere else in the province, I bet you dollars to donuts that you have been in Mercers Marine or you're familiar with it. And Mercers Marine is a store located in Clarenville. It's a unique store, meaning that it is the only physical plant of this particular one. It's a family-owned business. It's the only physical plant of Mercers Marine. However, Mercers Marine sells all across Canada, and they are, I think, the second biggest seller of fishery gear, I'll call it fishery gear for lack of a better term, in Atlantic Canada. So they're huge relative to their one store in Clarenville, because a lot of their stuff now is online. But today, what I want to focus on is the entrepreneurial part of Mercers, and we'll talk about the rest of it later on. But the first thing that I have is it's not a video, it's a voice, it's on the radio. Philip Mercer was interviewed a couple of years back by the Fisheries broadcast. And in that, it was really a two-part. It's 24 minutes long in total, but it's really two parts. And I'm going to play the first part of it. The first part of it really talks about the background of Mercers Marine. Where did it come from? What's its history? What have been some of the challenges of Mercers Marine? So I just want you to listen to that for about 15 minutes. Now, I got to get that to work, and I don't need to show you the CBC website. So I'm hoping now that this will...
Everything from a needle to an anchor. We're taking you shopping today in the oldest store in Clarenville. Mercers Marine has a colorful history and a strong connection to the water. And owner, Philip Mercer, has a lot of respect for those who make their living on the ocean. I'm Jane Adey. Welcome to the broadcast. You might not live in Clarenville, but chances are, even if you don't, you might have heard of Mercers Marine. It's been around since 1957. Fishers can find everything they need there, but so can crafters, hunters, and fashionistas too. So grab your coat and wallet. Let's go shopping in Clarenville. It's a typical busy Saturday at Mercers Marine. Curious shoppers in every aisle. Clarence Foley is a regular customer here. He's already had a good browse around. Now he's waiting for his wife by the door.
We were on our way down to Trinity now, and every time we pass through Tarnville, most of the times we drop into Mercers because it's a place you can get anything. Anything from fishing gear to in the woods, if you're moose hunting, or any red clothes, all kinds of different types of clothes. So we come here quite often, and it's a great place to shop.
Sharon Whalen is a first-timer, but she's heard lots of talk about Mercers Marine.
Well, I've been hearing about it for a number of years, and my brother-in-law has a cabin out this way, so anytime they need anything, I'll stop at Mercer's. So we said, well, we'll stop in today and have a look around. So far, my daughter has looked at shoes and wool and just about everything. There's everything to be found. It's one of those Needles and Anchor sort of places that we used to have years ago, like the store in the community where you go for everything. One-stop shopping. We don't do that anymore. We now have a mall.
Philip Mercer is the owner. I asked him to take me on a little tour around the store.
Most of this is probably style goods, winter clothing, jackets, snowmobile wear, footwear, have a lot of workwear.
Mercer decided to carry top brand names for outerwear, high-end stuff like Canada Goose, Arc'teryx, and more. And when it comes to footwear, the selection is any woman's dream come true, from basic sneakers to funky sandals and dress boots. Brands like Joseph Seibel from Germany and Fly from London. Philip Mercer says he leaves that kind of product buying to the younger staff.
I'm good at work boots, but I'm no good at ladies' high heel shoes.
We carry on with the tour.
So up this way, you get more into, you've got socks, and what's down this aisle here?
Oh, that's like knitting patterns, material. That's a fairly big business for us. Actually, there's Doreen. I call her Doreen. We call her the material girl. So that's her nickname. But the young ones don't know what I'm talking about when I say the material girl.
We pass by several aisles filled with hunting gear and everything you need for camping.
And so let's step out into the warehouse now, where I guess you had said you're doing most of your business these days out back here.
Yes. Well, most of our volume goes out to our back door rather than our front door. In our warehouse section, like fasteners, nuts, bolts, screws. That is a fairly big item for us. Hydraulics. We have like control valves, batteries, anchors, windows and doors. We were an Eastern Canadian distributor for Diamond Sea Glaze for commercial windows and doors for like landliners and ferries, things like that.
Yeah, certainly it's never ending. What's the square footage of your?
It's around 35,000. We call this section out here the fishing gear warehouse. We hooks and buoys, nets and rope, hoses, seining gear, fish boxes.
A huge area piled to the ceiling.
Literally.
So, yeah. Rope, every kind of rope I could ever imagine.
Yeah, we bring most of our ropes in from Korea, and you have to when you bring in, you have to bring container loads, so you need a fair space to store it. Yeah.
A big space for a big business. Philip Mercer says it's been a lot of work over the years, but hard work is all he's ever known. He credits that good example to his business-minded mother and father.
He started a grocery store in St. John's at the corner of Gower and Prescott Street called the Economy Cash Store. When they had a horse and cart and they were selling groceries and they used to things of that nature delivering around St. John's. And in 1948, I think it was, my uncle and my father decided to come to Clarenville. Now, we had no connection with Clarenville. So I guess he just saw it as a potential growth area. So we had no relatives or anything like that in Clarenville. And they came to Clarenville and started a wholesale grocery, mainly wholesale grocery business. And back then, that was first when trucks were going on the road, and some places didn't have roads. They got a few schooners, and the business grew. They had probably 40, 50 employees back at that point. So until 1955, the business was was doing okay. And in 1955, the business burnt down. There was a guy welding a gas tank in the basement of the building, and it exploded. And right at the time that it exploded, Hurricane Ione, struck, and the place just went up, and it was complete loss. And unfortunately, back at that time, Dad didn't have any insurance, so it basically lost everything he had. And then he went on the road as a traveling salesman for a couple of years. And Mom started a little store on the side of our house. We used to come out of our kitchen and go down to the store. It was a general store selling mainly like souvenirs, novelties, a little bit of groceries and what have you. And Dad, after 2 years on the road, Dad came back and started a poultry farm. So where our store is now is where our house used to be. And that's where I grew up. And we had 5,000 hens in our backyard. So we had a poultry farm, and Mom had the store on the side of the house. So that's pretty well how it started.
The Mercers ended up selling the poultry farm, but the store continued to grow. Philip worked with his parents up until 1968, but then things changed.
I left and went on my own. How should I put this? I knew everything and Dad knew nothing when I was younger. I found out in later life that was not the case. So in 1968, I quit. So I had my own business for 3.5 years. We were open 6 days a week and every night till 10. Never had a day off for 3.5 years. Both myself and my wife, because she works just as hard as I do on this business as well. So whatever credit is due here is also just as much due to my wife as myself. So in 71, Dad had an opportunity to go over to the shipyards. And at that point, he came to me and he said, would you come back and take over the store? And I said, well, we worked a deal that basically I took the store and he looked after the shipyards. He loved it up to the shipyards. So he basically got wrapped up in that, and the store was my baby.
You're listening to a story about Mercers Marine in Clarenville. Mercers is one of, if not the oldest store in town. It's been around since 1957. Philip Mercer is the owner, and he took over full control of the store from his father in the early 70s. And that's when Mercer says the business made big investments to supply boat owners and fishers.
We were not into marine supplies in 1971, but we always were tangled up with boats. Dad had schooners, and I grew up with boats and loved boats. So then I had a potential customer to buy some of the marine products at the Carnival Dry Dock. Plus, there was a couple of other people like Rube Carpenter, who was down in Port Union building boats, and Henry Volke. So there were some local boat builders around that were good enough to patronize us, and I started to import things that Dad at the time was probably buying from John Leckie Limited and other places, and then Marine was where I wanted to be. So that's where we went. And then probably from the early 70s till the late 80s, that was the main focus of the business by far. But when the moratorium was announced, all of a sudden I had $1.2 million worth of fishing gear on the water, paid for, and then they closed the fishery. Well, I can tell you it was a few pretty concerning years there, but we had to diversify and go into other lines to try to keep going. So, and to be honest, I think that's why we've been here for so long, is we've had a different product range. We sell needles and anchors. I sell hydraulic hose and crafts and knitting materials. So, our logo on our catalog is something for everyone. And that's what we try to be.
Yeah, it's one of the most diverse ranges of merchandise I can think of in any store. I've been in Newfoundland, really, and is that the reaction that you get from the customers? Is that there is something here for everyone?
Yes, and I think that's probably the secret: diversification, and having something that if one thing slows down, something else will pick up. We've managed to stay ahead of the game. Early 80s, decided to send out a few brochures, and we actually started off just stapling them together, handwritten brochures, catalogs. Actually, that's what turned into a catalog. So in the early '80s, we started to produce a catalog and send it out in the mail. And after a little while, we started to see it was working for us. So if we continued on with it.
Philip Mercer still has some of those first handwritten catalogs in his office, a reminder of how far the business has come.
Well, I haven't. Actually, I think this one is that's the second one. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of the first. If anybody has a copy of the first one, I'd really like to have it. I'll pay them well.
So this is just read a little bit from it there.
Well, it's just the Marine people, Mercers, and it's 17 pages counting, 18 pages counting the two covers. Keyhole life jacket with whistle, $29.95. Today, that's probably about $60, $70. Marine putty, fiberglass with hardener included, $9.95 a quart. Dory rollers, you don't see those anymore, $39.95. Cod jiggers, herring style, $2.99.
What's a dory roller?
The dory roller was like it used to go down. It's a roller about probably 5 or 6 inches in diameter, a wooden sheath, and which was a metal bracket held it up. And people used to use it for hauling trawl lines, putting over the side of the boat, and they put it down in the gunnels and the pull-pin holes. And a lot of the old guys up in the Grand Bank know what a dory roller is. Yeah, it was an old-time thing. Quick pick for defeathering cers. Oh my! So
Still sold out?
no, I don't.
The products have changed, but the method of advertising has led to much of Mercers Marine's success.
Well, this year we produced 40,000 catalogs, and they're 540 odd pages, full color, catalogs. So the catalog business had worked for us. Plus, we also we sold to a lot of dealers. So we set up wholesale accounts around Newfoundland in Newfoundland, Labrador, the Atlantic provinces, and we do a fair amount of trade up in the north and back and along Nunavut and up in that area. So our catalog has become a very important item for us.
How many people do you have working here now?
I think right now we got around 38, I believe. We've been exceedingly fortunate. You're asking us why we've been around. Since the day one, when Mom and Dad started the store, we've been very fortunate that we've had good employees. 50 years, I guess, or so, or a little over 50 years, I haven't fired a person. That's the secret. Good employees. And treat them all right, and they'll treat you all right.
What's it been like to have a business flourish in a place that you grew up in? You say you'd never really wanted to move away, but very few people have the same level of success with the businesses in their home community and be able to watch it grow and then pass it on to their family members. What's that been like for you?
Well, I guess that's what it's all about. I'm lucky enough that I'm living where I want to live. My son is working with me, and my grandson is working with me. So we're here. I got my son, my grandson, my wife is here. My family is living here in town. And I can see my grandkids, and the God shone down on me. I can't complain. I've been lucky. I've got a good life here.
You've been listening to a story about Mercers Marine store in Clarenville, a business that started way back in 1957 and is still thriving today.
So, I don't know how familiar you are with Mercers. What did you think of that from an entrepreneurial point of view? If you look at it,
Interesting.
yeah, well, it is, and when you speak to Philip, because I've gone down after I heard this originally, I had to chat with Philip on this, and I mean, he really is into this business. This is into. And if you look at it, you think about the tale that he told, you know, it started in the mid-1950s. His parents came here to Clarenville with no real association with the place. Started a cash store right there on the wharf over under Bear Mountain. They got into fishery. This boat right here, it was called the Marguerite Tanner. Marguerite Tanner, and in fact, Marguerite Tanner is the sister ship to the famous Blue Nose, and that ship allowed them to sell and collect fish and sell supplies all over Bonavista Bay, Trinity Bay area, Labrador, and the like. They really were involved in terms of that. And then, you know, it was like, wow, it all fell apart when it all caught fire. And what do you do when you're wiped out? You start all over again. And Ralph Mercer, who was Philip Mercer's father, the starter of this, he went on, and one of the things that he didn't mention was that Ralph Mercer, his father, was also mayor of Clarenville at one point in time. So he really started, built it up, had it fall down, built it up, worked really hard at it, got into different types of business, you know, from a traveling salesman to starting a farm, a hennery, and being a large producer of hens, and then going and joining the shipyard. Philip took over the business. Philip ran it through the 70s and 80s, and then 1992, and it was a year that's important to me because it was the year I started working with the college. And I remember on this day when John Crosby down on the wharf in St. John said, I didn't take the fish out of the GT Ocean, but you know, it turned Newfoundland upside down, and that was a terrible day 30 years ago. And Philip Mercer was down here as a business person responsible, or, you know, supplying the fishery, and the fishery just shut down. So how can you supply something that doesn't exist anymore? So again, it was like that fire that they had. It started all over again. In fact, instead of shrinking, Mercer's actually got into a whole bunch of other things, outdoor products. And if you go down there now, you can actually see the divide in the store between the fishing industry stuff and everything else. And everything else now takes up more floor space in terms of the physical store. So he really has been a bit of I'll call it a chameleon, in the sense of being able to turn as things changed, as the environment changed on him, be it a fire or be it the fishery shut down, he adapted. And I think that's one of the key things, the key takeaways, is to say that, you know, an ability to adapt is so critical for an entrepreneur. And one of the things that story didn't talk about too much, he talked about his catalog, and Philip loves his catalog. But it's not really the catalog so much anymore, it's their website. Their website, if you go to their website, which I'll bring you to now, give me a second. Their website is a very sophisticated website. First of all, you can receive emails from them. You'll see when you go in, you get an email. I'm already subscribed, so I don't need to again. But, I mean, they sell a lot of their product. He said he sells more stuff out the back door than their front door now. So Mercer's, this website is as good as anything you'll find anywhere else. And he still has his catalog. He will not give up that catalog. He loves that catalog. And you can actually view the catalog. And if you look at it, it's 500 pages. And if you walk into Mercer's down there, next time you go down, here's the physics. You can flick through it, and you can see all of the things they have down there. So Mercer's has really been a company and an entity that has changed. They were just fishing. Now they've gone into clothing and footwear, and as Jane 80 pointed out, some of the brand names that are down there they're not cheap brand names. They're top quality brand names. If you look at this is expensive gear, and it's not low end stuff. It's high end stuff, and that's basically what they sell. So Philip has really taken that business through some major turns, and he's really learned a lot from his parents. So another thing that business illustrates is the family business, something that we're going to talk about later on. And, Philip is in retirement mode now, and he has pulled away from the business in the last couple of years. And his son is running it now. So, again, this is third generation. And the question is, how many generations can a business last? Statistically, as we move through generations of people, businesses don't tend to last. So we got to see what happens to Mercers now over the next few years, and can Scott carry it through and generate even more growth in the business to live up to his father and grandfather's reputation. So that's essentially what I wanted to introduce today, was just to kind of set the table for this discussion on entrepreneurship and what is it that entrepreneurs are all about. We started to look at, well, what exactly is entrepreneurship? And, as I say, that example gives a good answer to the basic question. Entrepreneurs have been described as turning one's business ideas into reality. And the Mercer family is an excellent example of turning a business idea into a reality on multiple occasions. Okay. The dream of entrepreneurship is present in a lot of us. Very few people act on it, though. And there's a lot of uncertainty with it because there's no guarantees you're going to succeed or not. But still, every single year, thousands of Canadians take that plunge and become entrepreneurs and start small businesses. And small businesses is really what generates the growth in the Canadian economy. Why should we bother to study entrepreneurship? Well, again, it runs into a number of good reasons, not all of which relate to becoming an entrepreneur, a lot of which are related to general business management. If you think about students who study entrepreneurship are more likely to start a business, that's one aspect, but entrepreneurship allows students to make more money. They learn about important topics such as planning, management, growth, family business. These sorts of things are important in general business management. Students who study entrepreneurship develop critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills, which is the number one wanted skill out there right now. People need to be solving problems all the time, and we need people who have that ability. And we think about the fact that, well, okay, how much opportunity is there for small business people? Well, most of the businesses, in fact, 90% of businesses in Canada are considered as small to medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs is the terminology. And generally, entrepreneurship, most of us will fall into that category, whether we actually own the business or work in that business. How has entrepreneurship developed? Well, it's grown a lot since the 1970s. There's been a real reawakening of interest in entrepreneurship. 500,000 people a year take that plunge, either to become entrepreneurs or to work for entrepreneurs or to be part of a small business. That's a lot of people. And 54% of the Canadians say they thought about starting a business. Not all of them have acted on it, but a lot of them have thought about it. And, you think about, okay, let's assume they haven't acted on it, but let's look at the jobs that they're in. Are they doing the things that entrepreneurs do? And yes, the reality is, project management, business idea development, new concepts. This is a lot of the stuff that people do at work. And so many of the same skills are there in a work environment as in an entrepreneurial environment. And Canada is a really good growth center for entrepreneurs. In fact, over the course of these slides, I've shown you some that are just coming out of Clarenville, just again to focus on Clarenville. This graphic is not the quality I would like, but effectively, okay, so we're looking at entrepreneurs and we're saying, okay, there's some great opportunities, there's great opportunity for small business. And we think about, well, what's out there that's creating this opportunity, this growth? Well, there's demographic change. And we saw the demographic information yesterday For Newfoundland and Labrador, which is more pronounced than Canada, but Canada is basically the same. Effectively, you got a baby boom generation who are getting old, okay? That generation that were born between 1945 and 1965 are moving into retirement. The generations that came behind them there are fewer kids, fewer people, have greater sets of skills, and those people are going to replace those baby boomers as the baby boomers retire out. And those people have more skills and abilities to do the things that entrepreneurs do. And as a result, we're potentially going to have more entrepreneurs. We also have a lot of technological change. Wow, and technological change has presented a challenge, no doubt about it. A lot of people are challenged by technology. A lot of people are challenged by change in general. But that same thing that causes problems causes opportunities, because technological change, as we'll see in some of the people I will demonstrate to you or show you, they have made their business idea work based on technological change. So it provides a whole opportunity. We also have regulatory change, a lot of changes with regards to how businesses have to operate, things like occupational health and safety, things like business laws, stuff that we saw in business law last year, for example. We saw that these changes come into play. And if you've done any of the HR courses or even within the accounting courses, you'll see how regulations and rules have created an environment that is more sensitive, for lack of a better term, than it ever was. This provides opportunities for entrepreneurs. We've got economic changes. Wow, all kinds of economic changes. We've been through recessions. At the beginning of the 2000s, for example, there was a recession. In the 2008, there was another recession. These are cyclical. They come and go. And, good times and bad times. In Newfoundland and Labrador, we saw an economic boom when the price of oil was high. Now we're kind of in the low end of that, and probably coming out of it again, as prices of oil go up, because the oil is a good driver of our economy. We got social change. And if you look at Newfoundland and Labrador, you think about social change. This idea, for example, of the Newfoundlander has changed so much in the last number of years. All you do is go downtown St. John's and you'll see that the gentrification of Newfoundland has really happened. We're not all boys out in a fishing boat anymore. They're all going around in those Australian boats into coffee bars and the like. So again, a social change, and that's really made a big, and education tends to do that sort of thing. If we look at the number of self-employed in the labor force, the crux of it is the percentage is growing. Not a lot, went from 12% in 77 up to almost 16% in 2016, which is the latest year that there's census information for. But the fact of the matter is, it is growing. And we also think about it in terms of how many businesses there are. Wow, the vast majority of businesses are small. And if you look at, there are 600,000 plus small businesses in Canada that have 1 to 4 employees. That indicates that the power of small business and the power of entrepreneurs is huge. And as it tails off, you can see big firms are rare in Canada, relatively rare. So first, I wanted to take a look at that. That's kind of, again, the table setting thing. Now let's look at what is this deal with small business? What is the opportunity out there for small business? Why do these businesses come to be? Why are they so prominent in the Canadian experience? These relatively small businesses with less than 50 employees make up the chunk of all businesses. Well, first of all, it is a debate in Canada, and it is an ongoing debate, and it will always debate is what is a small business, okay? There is no hard definition for a small business. There are a bunch of suggestions. For example, Stats Canada, when they publish information, they use a measure of a business is a small business is that if it has less than $1 million worth of sales, okay? That's one definition. But there are lots of other definitions. Size is often determined by the number of employees, the total revenue, the total profits, or the type of management ownership structure. So there's no pat answer to say what defines a small business. Stats Canada uses this one here, less than $1 million worth of sales, and seeing Stats Canada generate these numbers right here, this is what that's based on, businesses that do less than $1 million worth of sales. Now, that number, it's easy to be a larger business because $1 million worth of sales is not that much anymore. You would think that, as the value of a dollar goes down in terms of its purchasing ability, $1 million is a small bar to meet. What is the current state of small business in Canada? And again, you look at some of the stats. Almost 100% of businesses in Canada can be classified as small or medium. So we got 0.2% are larger than 500 employees. So that's a big indicator. About 98% of businesses operating in Canada employ fewer than 100 employees. So again, 99.8 or less than 500, 97.9. So there's a 1% difference really between 500 and 100. 48% of the labor force is slightly over 5 million people, or slightly over 5 million people are employed in small business. And 50.2% of the gross domestic product, which is the sum of all goods and services produced in Canada in a year, is produced by small businesses. And about 42% of exports that go outside the country that generate sales abroad are from small business, and that's $200 billion. That's a lot. 84% of net job creations from small business in that range from 2013 to 2017, which is usually that's pretty tight. That's pretty new information because there's a lag on how we can collect the information. So 2017 is about as good as we're going to get for new information. And 100,000 new small businesses are started annually. So we got a real growth in small business here. My bad. So small business is something that is certainly growing. What are the major contributions of small business? And this is another thing that the textbook discusses, and that is always discussed in terms of any small business in any format of talking about entrepreneurship. First and foremost, labor intensity. There's a lot of jobs in small business, as we've seen. The vast majority of jobs created in Canada are created by small business. So they employ a lot more people relative to very large businesses. Innovation and inventions. Where does innovation come from? Usually it's coming out of small business. And again, I'll show you some examples there later on. The majority of inventions and innovations that social benefits come from small businesses. Small farms produce about 58.3% of innovation. So that's important to us because that's how we increase productivity and that's how we become a wealthy nation. If we think about productivity and profitability, now this is getting dated, this bit of information here. When I was in business school back there in the late 80s, there was a book that was called In Search of Excellence, and it came out, and the authors, this guy Peters and Waterman, they were at Harvard University, and they had done all kinds of research, and it was one of those, it was like a Bible back then of business people looking at that book. Anyway, Peters and Waterman came up with 8 points that really are used as this is why small business is good type thing, And so if we think about what the key attributes of small business in terms of productivity and profitability, Peters and Waterman said, look, small businesses are so good because of these factors. First of all, there's a bias for action. And all it means is they get stuff done. They don't end up in endless cycles of analysis and committee. Peters Waterman called it paralysis by analysis. We just analyze things to death and don't do anything. Small business is not like that. One owner says, I'm going this way. There, I made a decision. Doesn't need a big board of directors or a big massive consultation in order to get that direction. So it's a very nimble type operation. Staying close to the customer. The very fact that you are small means that you probably know your customers and you learn about customer preferences, which, as you recall from your marketing course, if you think about first-year marketing, marketing is all about finding out what the customer wants and producing it for them and letting them know you're producing it. So staying close to the customer is so easy in small business. That fundamental concept of marketing, the marketing concept it's called, is really embodied by small business. You know, larger organizations tend to be further removed from their customers and may not hit the mark very easily. And then we got the autonomy of entrepreneurship, and that is entrepreneurs have the ability to make their own decisions, and if it works, it's on their shoulders, they get the benefits, and if it falls apart, it's on their shoulders and they get the blame, I suppose. And so there's nobody worried about covering their proverbial asses there. You know, it's just, I'm doing it, and that's how I'm going to do it. And this is this kind of joie de vivre, or let's get it done, into the deep carpe diem, all these Latin terms that you hear. That's what small business is all about, doing stuff. Waterman and Peters also talk about productivity through people. And again, you know, we talk about the number of people who work for small business, creating the awareness in all employees that the best efforts are essential. You know, we talk about this in organizational behavior. How do we get people to follow along and say the goals of the organization are the same goals as the individuals that work for them? How do we do that? It's much easier to do in small business when you're close and there are fewer people. As an organization gets bigger, the challenge of making everybody swim in the same direction towards the goal of business gets more challenging. Hands-on, value-driven. Again, you know, you're onto this theme that where you're close to the customer and you're close to the decision-making. The very fact that there's not lots of layers, there's so few people work for an organization, you can have a talk over the coffee cooler. This allows you to be nimble, make business decisions, and do stuff very quickly. So it's very much, we do things in order to make the business work. And finally, they say it's a simple form, and it is a simple form. You know, there's not too many layers. It's not too complicated. It's simple in the terms that you can make decisions and enact them within the hour, let alone the day, the week, the month. So that was what Peters and Moderman said with regards to why businesses are profitable, why small businesses are profitable, and why they exist. You know, that's really, you know, kind of hits at these key points. Small business is also flexible. And again, focusing on what Peters and Waterman said, that kind of holds true. They can respond quickly. They're nimble. So when you have a pandemic and things change all of a sudden, small business is much more able to adapt than large business. Small business tends to be owned by Canadians. You know, if we think about multinationals and companies from God knows where coming in here, you don't have that problem with small business. Small businesses live here, work here, their families are here, they have a vested interest in here. So that's a big benefit to small business. And if we think about small business in terms of foreign ownership, there's very little foreign ownership. Small business health is a link to economic growth. It's what's called a leading indicator. We know if small business is doing well, the economy is doing well. So it gives a connection between if small business is successful, the economy is doing well. And finally, we got social contributions. This is contributing to the people and place that we live in. Small business owners often have a long-term interest. Again, we got that commitment because they live here, their families work here, to the places where the businesses operate. So as a result, they tend to contribute more. And that is so true. If we look at here in Clarenville, I'll just use my council knowledge, for example. It's much easier to get donations and contributions from our local business than it is to larger organizations. It's just the fact is that these businesses, again, all of the things we talked about, they can move around on a dime. They can make decisions quickly. There's not so much paperwork. It's much easier to get them to work out. Forward, if we think about small business too, we also say, well, where is small business headed? This world is changing at a rapid pace. Wow, you know, our business is going to survive? Will they adapt? Will they continue to succeed? Do they have some sort of competitive advantage over a very large business? is the entrepreneur something that's going to survive or something that's not going to survive? Well, what are some of the things that all entrepreneurs need to concern themselves with? Not to be worried about, but to find opportunity in. The other thing that I'd like to mention is this idea of the entrepreneur, just to kind of change gears to the entrepreneur. So that's a small business. Now we're looking at the person who runs a small business. And we ask, why does anyone do this? Really, ultimately, what is it that drives someone to do this? And there's been a bunch of basic reasons that have been floated. And these include things like out of necessity. They lost their job. And you hear tell of so many people who lost their job. I always remember the story. I pay close attention. I got one on. The Tilley hat company. I don't know if you're familiar with the Tilley hat company. They make hats for people who boat and the like. Anyway, they've expanded out way beyond hats now into shirts and things. But the guy who started that company back in the middle 80s, Alex Tilley was his name. He was a long-lost cousin in Toronto. He was a guy that worked for 3M and he got fired. I don't know if he got fired, he got laid off, but let's assume he got fired. And he was on Venture and he was talking about how, the fact that, wow, I had nothing. I had to do something. And he really enjoyed sailing, and he had a problem that his hat used to blow off his head and sink, and he couldn't take it. So he said, I can make my own hat. And effectively, that's where it came from. So that was really out of necessity. He needed a job. He needed to do something. He saw an opportunity. Other people, they feel it's a predetermined fate. And I know people like that just are consummate entrepreneurs, mainly because it's a family business. They're used to a family business. Their parents were entrepreneurs. That's the life they grew up in. They know nothing but. So it's a predetermined fate. And that is really kind of the same thing as an internal desire to do. They're just so sick and tired of working for someone that they can't take that. They want to do it on their own. And some people are just inquisitive or are not interested or just don't have an attention span for working for someone. They need to explore. So many entrepreneurs just have ideas that they want to carry through. And we got this other issue of the people that just need control freaks. So we look at the entrepreneurial process. It really involves turning ideas into action. And if you got an idea for a product and you think that product would meet someone's needs, then, you probably are on the road. If you got to have an idea that somebody else values, that they're willing to pay for. They got to be able to purchase what you're making. Identifying those opportunities is not always easy. Some people, it is easy. They see opportunity. Other people, they'll never see opportunity no matter what. It really depends on the individual. And as I say, that type of personality you are has an effect on your ability to recognize opportunities where you see them. So that is the real challenge, is recognize opportunities that connect with their abilities to solve that opportunity or take advantage of that opportunity and the resources to achieve it. So, if you say to yourself, okay, very good, am I that type of person? Well, here's really the criteria that you need in order to really be an entrepreneur. You need to have a belief in yourself and your ability to succeed. You need to have lots of energy. You need to have a future focus and always looking for opportunities. You need to have some skills at being able to put an idea into reality. Organizational skills, people skills, task skills, these sorts of things need to come into play. You got to be achievement driven. These got to be type A type personalities who are just stick-to-itness achievers. And normally it's not money that drives them. Normally it's they just need to achieve. They're very committed. They got to be committed because you're going to be knocked down. Look at the Mercer family. They were knocked down on 3 occasions. Entrepreneurs are willing to accept risk, work hard, and take action. Risk is always a problem. You may not succeed. That is a good chance that you will not succeed, but you still do it anyway. And again, it's an educated risk as opposed to a blind risk. Entrepreneurs are able to adapt to change. And that's what we've seen. You know, a lot of changing environment out there. You've got to be able to change. And entrepreneurs rarely concede defeat. There's no such thing as business failure. You look at all your business failures as an opportunity to learn. We also have a lot of women entering the entrepreneurial field in Canada. And this little graphic here that comes right out of your book is you think about the share of people who are women entrepreneurs is growing relative to. So we've got men-owned, which is still the vast majority. We're still looking at somewhere in the 60 to 70% range are male-owned. But, you know, in the 20% range or thereabouts is women. And you can see that that has kind of nudged up a little bit in the last number of years. And the equally owned is the other one there. Do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur is really the question. And that's one of the key assignment, that very first assignment that I have in this course for you to look at. It's not a hard assignment, but it basically answers that question. That's what you're going to be looking at in that very first assignment.